The first week of fall camp is done, and I've got my hot take. I think Purdue's defense will be better in 2026, and I think Kevin Kane is the right man for the job.
You are Locked On Boilermakers, your daily podcast on the Purdue Boilermakers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Boilermakers here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Now, the number one sports podcast network where it's your team every day. As always, I'm your host. I am Nick Arvin. I'm talking Boilermakers every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, the only daily Purdue show out there. And today we have a fun episode because Purdue is in fall camp. We're fully there. I believe the fifth practice wrapped up yesterday. We are in the end of the first week, beginning of the second week now of fall camp. So it's been great so far. Very few injuries, a lot to talk about. And that's what we're going to start out today's episode with. It is the defense. Why I think Purdue's defense takes a leap and why I believe Kevin Kane is the one for the job. Then we'll keep on with the theme of defense in today's episode, getting into the 11 guys I expect to start for Purdue, who those guys are, what their impact will be, best case and worst case scenario for some of those players. We'll finish off today's episode getting into my biggest wishes for fall camp going into the regular season, which is just a few weeks away now. Week 1 against Indiana State almost here, and I can't wait. So what do I want to see from this team throughout fall camp? Before we get into all that and before we get into Purdue's defense, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Join all the action at FanDuel.com to play Daily Dingers and make your free pick on who's hitting a homer this MLB season. But I'm not focused on baseball right now. I'm focused on football because we're almost here, and you look into year 2 of the Barry Odom era. What do you want to see from year 2 of the Barry Odom era? Well, obviously, the first thing that comes to mind is you want to see a better product on the field. You want to see wins in the win column, which honestly, this is kind of what I've gotten from people within the Purdue fan base, but also I've been on a Notre Dame show, I've been in an Illinois show, and both of those guys told me that they think that even though the wins didn't necessarily come for Purdue last year, the product looked better for a good amount of time last year, and definitely throughout the early season, some of those old tendencies started to show up towards the end of the season, but we saw a jump in year 1 of the Barry Odom era for how productive, how talented this team looked compared to that final year of Ryan Walters. However, and this is the big key here, if it doesn't result to wins, nothing matters. So this year for Barry Odom is going to be largely about building a program that doesn't just look like they've improved, but it actually shows up in the win column. This is actually a program that gets forward in the right trajectory, gets a step forward in terms of winning a couple of conference games. And you look at how Purdue does that. Yes, turnovers on the offensive side of the ball, those need to be limited. But I think by far the largest glaring issue from last year's Purdue team is the defense. There really wasn't a spot on the defense I thought was very good. And I hate to say that. I mean, I thought the linebackers, Manny Powell, Charles Correa, come over from UNLV, and they looked pretty solid. But outside of just very few and far between guys, the defense was pretty rough. The pass defense, especially. Secondary got picked apart through a good portion of last year. So Barry Odom, he understands, well, we need to make a change going into year 2 because this is going to be the year I'm judged on. He went to Big Ten Media Days. He took all the excuses away that he might have about what happened last year, how things played out, said, well, I have the resources, I have the personnel, I have the coaching staff, and he got a new addition to the coaching staff in Kevin Kane, who is the new defensive coordinator of the Purdue Boilermakers in 2026, but also the old defensive coordinator in 2024, where he had a pretty bad season. He didn't know how to use his guys. Dylan Thieneman was wildly misused by Kevin Kane. All of this goes to say that I understand the criticism. I understand why there's some people within the Purdue fan base that sit here and say, oh, well, you're pulling from the old guard. You're pulling from that old staff and you expect to find success. I understand there. I understand the criticism there. But I say that to say this. I think that Kevin Kane is the right one for the job. I think that Kevin Kane is the right guy for the 2026 Purdue Boilermakers. Yes, he wasn't the right guy under Ryan Walters, but we've talked a lot about Kevin Kane because it is such an interesting and polarizing topic coming back to Purdue. And more specifically, I had Rob Blackman on the show, the voice of the Purdue Boilermakers, and we got into talking about Kevin Kane. And the thing that really stood out to me when you talk about Kevin Kane, when you talk about his previous history, is that even after leaving Purdue, even after leaving in Ryan Walters and just not working out there, his family stayed in West Lafayette. This is a family, and Kevin Kane especially is a guy that cherishes West Lafayette, that cherishes Purdue, that is proud of this program. And to be honest with you, even though the defense was not good at all in 2024, I'll take that any day. I'll take that any day. A guy that, didn't have a good tenure, but is willing to try something new, willing to put his expertise and what he does good into this new team, and a guy that cares deeply about Purdue, because where Purdue football is in the state of this program right now, where you're at the bottom and trying to find a way to just find a little bit of success, you need loyalists. You don't need assistants that are halfway out the door, which is a strong majority of assistants in college football, trying to find that next promotion, trying to find that next gig. That's not who Kevin Kane is. He is a guy that wants to be at Purdue, a guy that wants to bring success to Purdue. That's a big part of the reason why I think he's going to find success, the reason why I think he's the right guy for the job. But beyond that, obviously, that only does so much. Your loyalty to the university, that only means so much if you're not putting the right system, if you're not doing the right things on the field. However, this is the other part of the conversation. I think that Kevin Kane has the right pieces, and I think that Kevin Kane does the right things. I think he specializes in the right things to bring this team and bring the defense success. I don't think it'll be a top half defense within the Big Ten, but I do think it's going to be a defense that is good enough that if your running game is going, if Ryan Browne isn't turning the ball over, you're going to have a chance to win, because Kevin Kane, brilliant with linebackers. Say what you want about Kevin Kane. Say what you want about some of the secondary woes that we saw in 2024. Say what you want about some of the run defense things. His linebackers are dang good. He specializes in linebackers. This year, he will be coaching linebackers alongside with his duties as defensive coordinator. And Purdue brought in some good linebackers. You bring in JoJo Hayden from Illinois. You bring in Anthony Specka from Penn State, Hudson Miller from Toledo, amongst others. And then you're able to return some great ones, notably Charles Correa, who I expect to be an absolute menace on this defensive side. You return Winston Berglund, who comes back after initially entering into the portal. There's talent at linebacker this year. I don't think that there's any doubt about that. And for Kevin Kane, that's what he needs. That's what he needs to find success. He wants a defense that's going to be attack first, a defense that's getting downhill, especially at the linebacker spot, and forcing turnovers, aggressive defense. That is what Purdue needs in 2026. Say what you want about Kevin Kane. I understand the criticisms. I understand why people have some doubts about what Kevin Kane is going to be able to do back at Purdue. And in the back of my mind, I think that there's still some doubts on my end as well. However, I have an optimistic approach heading into this season. I have an optimistic approach when I look at this defense. And quite frankly, I have an optimistic approach when I look at Kevin Kane. He misused a lot of the players, and there was plenty of talent on the teams that he had in 23 and 24. I'm not going to be the one to defend him, but I don't think it's unfair to, and maybe it'll come back to bite me. Maybe it will come back to bite me, but I don't think it's unfair to have an optimistic approach about Kevin Kane coming back to Purdue for the reasons I mentioned. He loves the university. He loves West Lafayette. He loves the black and gold, and he does things well enough where he's skilled at, which is the linebacker play, which is running that 3-4 defense, having a lot of reliance on those linebackers. I think the personnel is there if he is able to, I guess, answer some of those questions about how does he use those guys. I think he has the personnel to find success at Purdue. So I expect Purdue's defense to take a leap. I really don't think there's any other option for the Boilermakers in 2026. This is a defense that has to take a leap. But for my hot take Thursday, I'm going to say that Kevin Kane is the right man for the job, and Purdue's defense takes a leap into 2026, led by that strong linebacker core. That's what we're going to talk about a little bit more coming up here next. Who is that starting 11 for Purdue on the defensive side of the ball? What do all those guys bring? Is the linebacker core the best part of Purdue's defense? I'm answering that coming up here next on Locked On Boilermakers. But first, baseball fans, if you think you know who's hitting a homer today, FanDuel's giving you a free chance to call your shot with daily dingers. It's easy to play. Just make your free pick for who you think will hit a home run in their game. If you're right, you'll receive a profit bonus to use on your next bet for a chance at extra winnings. Best of all, you can make a free pick every day throughout the MLB season because daily dingers is another fun way to stay engaged with every day's games. Whether you're following your favorite team or keeping an eye on matchups across the league, every game has someone capable of going deep. And now you get the chance to make your prediction before first pitch. Obviously, my Cardinals are no longer in contention, or at least it feels that way, maybe for a wild card, but I'm always in contention with my guy, Jordan Walker on FanDuel, because Daily Dingers gives me a great opportunity to still win, even if my Redbirds aren't winning themselves. So are you ready to play your game today? Join all the action at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com to play Daily Dingers and make your free pick on who's hitting a homer. Play ball and swing for the fences on FanDuel, an official partner of the MLB. We're back here on today's episode of Locked On Boilermakers, getting into more defensive stuff. I love the defensive side of the ball, and so far throughout fall camp, it looks like a defense that is aggressive, a more relentless defense, and ultimately a defense that's going to give Purdue a better opportunity to win this fall. All positives in those categories, but what is that defense actually going to look like? What is the starting 11 going to look like when they step on the field here in just a few weeks in Ross 8 against the Indiana State Sycamores? Well, I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not a magician, but I'm going to do my best to try and predict what that starting 11 will look like when we get things underway in just a few weeks. I want to start on the defensive line because obviously that has been a point of conversation throughout the course of the offseason, losing Jamarion Harkless, losing some other nice pieces on the defensive line. But I thought that Barry Odom did a decent job at kind of reloading and some retention as well on the defensive line. It's not a group that I'm as confident in as that linebacker core, or probably not even at the defensive back position, but I still think that there are some key pieces that are going to produce for Purdue in 2026. And the first guy that without a doubt is going to produce, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, it's Elo Medozie. We had a show yesterday with Dustin Schutte, who does Boilermakers on SI, and Elo Medozie was his guy to be one of Barry's breakouts in 2026. Transfer edge rusher, comes over from Georgia. Yes, he didn't produce a ton last year at Georgia. At Army the year before, though, 6.5 sacks, was a relentless piece of Army's front seven, and that's the reason why Kirby Smart allows Medozie, wants him in the transfer portal because of how good he was at Army. So when people have conversations, yes, you bring in a Georgia edge rusher, but he didn't produce at Georgia. I mean, okay, like Georgia's defensive lines consistently have so much NFL talent. It's tough for guys to get opportunities. So just because Medozie didn't play a whole lot at Georgia doesn't mean much to me. More so the fact that he was even a guy that Kirby Smart wanted for the defensive line, I think speaks volumes to the pass rushing ability of Medozie, who will no doubt be a starting edge rusher this year for Purdue. And once again, Kevin Kane does run that 3-4 defense. So you're going to have 3 defensive linemen, 4 linebackers. Medozie will be one of those edge rushers on that defensive line. I could see rotating some guys out. I think that we'll definitely see quite a few rotations on the defensive line because you have a little bit of depth, not the deepest position once again, but you do have some depth this year at the defensive line. We'll see how all that plays out, but Medozie will certainly be a key piece alongside either one of Kurt Neal or Rodney Laura. As of right now, I think it will be Kurt Neal, who is that Big Ten veteran guy, defensive tackle, comes over from Illinois. Just another example of Barry Odom bringing in great talent from Power 4 programs, and especially within the conference. That's a gigantic pickup. One of two Illinois Illini that we're going to talk about here in the starting 11. I think it's Kurt Neal as of right now. I think he has more experience and is a bit of a better fit than what Rodney Laura presents coming over from UCF. Could see that be a situation where those two guys rotate in and out, but I have to give it to Kurt Neal as of right now. The other edge rusher, though, and this one might be a little bit of a hot take, but I'm in love with CJ Madden. I think that he's one of the most underrated players that Barry Odom was able to bring back for another year into his second year at Purdue. I love CJ Madden. Yes, not the most production, only half a sack, 6 solo tackles last year, but it'll be his senior year last year of eligibility this year. 6'4", 270 pounds. I think he can get off the line pretty quick. I'm excited to see what CJ Madden does this year on the other side of Medozie. I mean, he's my guy. I think that's kind of, I don't know if it's a hot take, but he's one that I think is going to surprise some people this year. Purdue fans and Big Ten fans alike, guys that aren't looking at Purdue, and Purdue fans, I think you guys will be surprised with how good CJ Madden is going to look in 2026. So my defensive line, Elo Medozie, Kurt Neal, and CJ Madden. The linebackers are where it gets fun because Charles Correa undoubtedly will be the key, will probably be the star and the leader of this defense. He's that weak side style linebacker. And I do think that he could be in that spot on the weak side. But the thing that's so beautiful about Charles Correa is he's so versatile. He was one of the silver linings for Purdue last year, 3 sacks. So getting to the quarterback, had a ton of tackles. There's a reason he's back at Purdue. Let's put it that way. So he's a weak side guy, but he can rotate around, which would be perfect for Purdue, perfect for Kevin Kane, because he'll sometimes use a linebacker as one of those hybrid guys, put him in pass coverage, but you bring in Anthony Specka behind Charles Correa. Comes over from Penn State, who is that weak side linebacker as well, because if you are able to put Charles Correa in, if he's comfortable rotating around that linebacker core, it provides opportunities for Anthony Specka to get comfortable in that position or in that spot at linebacker where he is traditionally been and where he is more comfortable at. So maybe it's a smoother transition period to playing a higher volume against Big Ten opponents. Once again, similar to Medozie being a linebacker and going to Penn State, that speaks enough of itself outside of just not getting lost in that linebacker core and not having a ton of volume. I do think if Anthony Specka and Charles Correa can find a way to coexist in that linebacker core, it would be best case scenario for Purdue. The two guys in the middle I expect we will see this year. Winston Berglund is one where maybe he ends up starting. I think that he could be a guy like CJ Madden where Barry Odom is able to retain him. Some people are a little bit under the radar or maybe overlooking Winston Berglund a little bit, but he ends up being a highly productive piece of this defense. I could see that for Berglund, but without a doubt, I think that JoJo Hayden is one of the best transfer portal additions Barry Odom was able to bring this year. He is a Kevin Kane type guy, relentless, strong, has great tackling ability, can force turnovers. I love JoJo Hayden on the inside at middle linebacker. I think he's going to be a guy this year for Purdue, especially if Kurt Neal is in that front seven as well. 2 Illinois transfers. That'll be a fun game when Purdue travels down to Champaign with those two guys on the defensive side of the ball this year. But I think it's going to be JoJo Hayden, Anthony Specka, Winston Berglund, and Charles Correa at those 4 linebacker spots. Defensive back is where it gets a little bit interesting because Purdue had to do almost a complete overhaul at defensive back this year. Hadori Hines, I'm going to be very upfront with that. He is one that Purdue was able to retain, and a player that I think is absolutely in for a big year. Hadori Hines, great within pass protection. Just very solid in terms of defending that pass, being a good coverage corner, not allowing a whole lot of balls to be thrown his way. That's what you want to see, especially for a defensive backcourt that was very bad last year. One of the worst pass defenses in all of college football. Hadori Hines will be a big piece of that this year, I expect. And then on the other side at corner, I think Saunders is due for a big year coming over from Utah. He's more of that lengthy guy, 6'4", 195 pounds. I believe Hadori Hines is 200 and maybe some change, right around 6'1". So you have two different types of corners. I think both equally talented. Hadori Hines, another one of those retained players Barry Odom was able to bring in that I just expect the world for in 2026. So Saunders and Hadori Hines at the corner position. Jaden Mangham is one that's talking to media, which gives you the idea he's probably going to be one of those better players this year for Purdue. Transfers over from Michigan, was at Michigan State originally, will be a starting safety this year for Purdue. There's not much discussion behind that. Jaden Mangham is guy, athletic as can be. He's quick, great ball hawk within the secondary, just the type of player that Purdue needed after last year. The last safety position gets a little bit interesting because you bring in Mr. Clark, who comes over from FIU, D. Newsom, who was more of a corner, but we could potentially see at safety. John Slaughter comes over from Colorado. At the other safety spot, I think it's really just pick your poison, see how Kevin Kane's defense ends up rolling. That's the spot where I am a little bit concerned. I think we have the talent, but not the best track record for Kevin Kane in the secondary. We'll see how all that plays out. As of right now, I would probably give it to Mr. Clark coming over from FIU, one of the best names in college football, but seems to be doing pretty good in fall camp so far. Everything I've heard from fall camp has been positive towards Purdue's defense. It really does look like a defense taking positive strides in the right direction. And I think that Kevin Kane, once again, is the right guy for the job. I'm not a genie. I'm not a magician, but it seems like these could be the 11 guys that end up playing on the defensive side of the ball for Purdue in 2026. So coming up here next, we're going to finish off today's episode of Locked On Boilermakers, cap off today's episode with my wish list for the rest of fall camp. It's coming up here next on Locked On Boilermakers. Since 1986, the game has been creating classic college hats that fans are proud to wear. Whether you're an alumnus, current student, season ticket holder, or simply someone who never misses a game, a great college hat is more than just apparel. It's a way to represent your school wherever you go, because this year the game is celebrating its 40th anniversary by giving fans a chance to save on some of their most iconic college hats. If you've been thinking about replacing an old favorite or adding a new one to your collection, now is the perfect time. This hat right here, this white one, has been in my rotation for quite a while. It is courtesy of the game. I wear it on the show, but also just out in public. Very stylish, very neat. If you like what you see, you got to get going with the game. With hundreds of officially licensed college hats to choose from, you'll find the perfect fit for game day and every day. Don't miss the chance to celebrate 40 years of the game with 40% off your entire order. Visit thegamecaps.com and use promo code LOCKEDON at checkout. That's thegamecaps.com, promo code LOCKEDON. Celebrate 40 years of the game with 40% off. But don't wait. This anniversary offer won't last forever. To end off today's episode, I wanted to get into my fall camp wish list, so to speak. The things that I hope happens for Purdue football as we get into fall camp. The things I really want to see to give me confidence that this team will have a good trajectory going into the regular season here in just a few weeks. And I want to kick things right off with the tight end spot. And it's, will George Burhenn, or hopefully George Burhenn, really steps up and shows that he's capable of performing off the injury and that he's going to be a big piece of this passing game this year for Purdue. Things kind of got knocked out, or things kind of got messy whenever Kylan Fox, the transfer tight end from UCF, goes down with an injury that is going to turn out to be a season-ending injury. It appears making depth at the tight end position pretty short. So it's going to be pretty essential this year that George Burhenn is that guy that we need him to be, that Purdue needs him to be, that he steps up, and that coming off that injury, he is still capable of not just being a pass threat. He's a guy that could be moved over to receiver, a guy that's very versatile as a pass catcher, but also capable of producing in the running game and being a good blocking tight end. There's going to be a lot on George Burhenn's plate that he didn't initially expect for there to be, now that Kylan Fox isn't with the program or that he's hurt. So, it sucks, but that's football. So George Burhenn is going to have to step up for this team. That's something I want to see as we get into fall camp. This is pretty cliche, pretty elementary, but the quarterback has to progress. And certainly for Ryan Browne, after a last year where he threw 10 interceptions, only threw 9 touchdowns, that's a huge one for fall camp, is seeing the progression of Ryan Browne. Now, I've been pretty outgoing about the fact that I'm a fan that Barry Odom ended up bringing back Ryan Browne. I think it was the right decision for this program, where you bring back that quarterback, you bring back your returning guy that has a year under you, has another opportunity without any competition this year to learn the system and kind of figure out a little bit better what he needs to do. I like it. Also, not having to pay a ton of NIL money out to another quarterback who there could be question marks there. How well does he actually produce once he gets to the program? Those are all big question marks. And I think although there are still certainly some question marks around Ryan Browne, they're a little bit smaller than what you would have hitting the transfer portal. So I like bringing Ryan Browne back, but that's pretty dependent on how well does he do now as he gets into another year at Purdue. The turnovers can't be an issue the way that they were last year for Ryan Browne. That cost Purdue some close games. And if you're going to, as we've mentioned 1,000 times on today's episode, if you're going to get into that win column and get this program back in the right trajectory, back in the right direction, it's going to be essential for Ryan Browne to take care of the football, to make veteran decisions, because right now he's one of the older guys on this roster. So he needs to take care of the football, be that veteran, be that leader. So far, what we've seen from him as a human being has been positive, but now I want to see that translate onto the football field. So obviously Ryan Browne taking care of the football, being that veteran leader, and just having better numbers, being more efficient. That's what I want to see out of Browne in fall camp. I also want to see one of his pass catchers, one of these wide receivers, step up and say, hey, I'm going to be that number one option. Purdue brings in a few guys in the transfer portal. Asad Wasim, sub 6 foot guy from FAU, Xavier Townsend, sub 6 foot guy from Iowa State, Jalen Hornsby out of Syracuse. Purdue ends up bringing in Bisi Owens, who is just this physical receiver out of Penn. I like the variety of guys. And this is something that I've heard, and I love this, where you never want to have your receivers be the same. You would love to have your receivers be different. And I think Purdue does have that, where Denylon Morrissette is that 6'1" guy that can kind of be that deep threat receiver. You have Bisi Owens, who's 6'4", extremely physical, can be that physical jump ball type receiver. And then you have Xavier Townsend and Asad Wasim, those smaller slot guys that are capable of just getting lost, having those quick throws that are able to get you 7, 8, 9, 10 yards. That's very encouraging. But until you see those guys actually play for Purdue, Denylon Morrissette hurt last year, the year before, not a ton of production. All these transfers, you never know how those guys are actually going to suit up and play for Purdue. So during fall camp, I want to see one of these guys, whether it's a transfer, whether it's one of the returning receivers, I want to see them step up, and I want to see one of these guys take that role and say, hey, I am going to be Ryan Browne's playmaker this year. Hot take, I think it's going to be Denylon Morrissette. I think he has that chemistry, but I need to see it from him throughout the fall to be confident in his abilities come Indiana State. So I think that's one thing that's extremely essential right now for this team, and more specifically that receiving core, is to get ready and for one of these guys to really step up and be the guy, quite frankly, going into the season. The final thing that's going to be on my wish list, although I'm sure we could go all episode long about wishes I have for Purdue football, but it's for those transfer linebackers, similar to the wide receivers, how one of those guys needs to step up. But I want to see these transfer linebackers shine throughout fall camp, because that's such a big piece of the puzzle. And that's primarily what we've talked about through the course of this episode, how JoJo Hayden changes things, how Anthony Specka changes things, Hudson Miller potentially changes things from Toledo. If those guys are capable, if those guys show out the way that we kind of expect them to, that gives us insurance. That gives us the space of, or the peace of mind that the linebacker core is going to be much better in 26, especially with that piece where you already know he's going to be a dog in Charles Correa at linebacker. If these transfer linebackers can show up throughout fall camp and continue to produce, continue to be the stars that we hope they are at the linebacker core, I think that answers a lot of questions. And I think that gives us a lot of answers to what does that defense look like? How is Kevin Kane going to use these guys? And is this defense going to take a leap into 2026? My answer to that question is yes. I do think that Kevin Kane is the guy for Purdue, at least as of right now, and for the current spot where Purdue is in. I think the defense takes a leap into 2026. And that's all I got for you guys today. So thank you all for watching another episode of Locked On Boilermakers. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you like, subscribe, comment. All that really helps us out a ton as we're heading into year 2 of Locked On Boilermakers. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or whatever your preferred podcast platform is, make sure you leave 5 stars. That also really helps us to grow and get discovered by more Purdue fans out there. So that's all I got for you guys today. Until tomorrow, as always, boiler up, hammer down.